Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror film from the United States, English language, released in the year 2013, directed by Carl Mueller, and this film is called Mr. Jones. So Mr. Jones is about a legend surrounding this man who is said to be very strange, and I'm not going to give anything away, but those that are in contact with Mr. Jones are changed forever. So you've got this couple, now they want to go off into the woods to actually make their lives better. They believe that they're missing something, and so going out in the middle of the wilderness, being with nature is going to be a big positive for them. So they get there, they start documenting their experience, and this is where they come across the legend of Mr. Jones. And so Mr. Jones is said to have lived in a very secluded cabin. They get to the cabin and they believe that they've seen Mr. Jones, but this is where very strange things start to happen, and the reality and the fantasy worlds start to collide. And so it's going to go down to a very, very dark nightmare, and whether or not they live to tell the tale is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Mr. Jones. I didn't know this movie even existed, and the only reason why I came across it is because I was actually reading an article in a magazine about very strange horror films, and Mr. Jones was one that really caught my attention because I like found footage horror films. Now I know a lot of people out there don't like that, and if you're not a fan of this subgenre, then you're not going to get anything out of Mr. Jones, so you may as well stop watching this review now, because it's got everything that you're going to hate about found footage. So putting that aside, for me, I love found footage and I really like the overall story. And so I thought, all right, well, this does seem very intriguing. It is ticking all the right boxes as far as enticing the viewer to go and watch it, but I wasn't quite sure what I was actually going to get. And so there are things I liked about Mr. Jones, but unfortunately I think it was a little bit too extravagant, a little bit too ambitious for its own good, and it does lose control somewhat, and therefore it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And that's something I'll go into a little bit later, but what I liked about Mr. Jones is that found footage horror films are a very easy avenue for a cash grab, is that you can just repeat things that have been done time and time again, and because people love found footage, they'll go and watch a film, a new found footage horror film. And so a lot of directors know this, and a lot of directors will just splash something on the screen that you've seen time and time again, so it's very lazy. This is an avenue for very lazy filmmakers, and it's something that is not really utilising the full potential that found footage horror can be. But I will say that Carl Mueller is not one of these directors. This is a director who actually uses the found footage in a way that I thought was very respectful, because he's trying something a little bit different. And yes, the different sort of aspect of Mr. Jones does fall against it a little bit, but I can applaud the fact that it wasn't just flogging a cash cow. It wasn't just doing something that's recycled. It wasn't doing something that wasn't taking any risks. This is a movie that does stay out of the confines of safety and is actually trying to make a shadow of its own, and it does make a shadow of its own, and I know people out there might appreciate it for what it is, and I can appreciate the fact that it is trying something different, it is taking risks, but unfortunately those risks, as I said, don't quite make Mr. Jones get over the finish line. And so I thought the acting was fairly decent, especially the couple. I thought the chemistry was there. They have bickering between each other, which is something that you would expect from this style of film. But I thought, all right, well, I could actually get into the moment. I could actually feel as though this was a real couple. I never felt as though they were reading lines from a script. And so the acting was fairly decent. But the biggest the impressive quality about Mr. Jones is the ability to create a very, very scary atmosphere. As far as atmosphere is concerned, this is scary. This is like a nightmare. This is like a dream that you have no control of, and you just wake up from it feeling as though, okay, I have just experienced something that scared me. And the nightmare aspect of Mr. Jones does work in its favour, because it is a bit different. It doesn't feel as though it follows conventional methods, but it does work against it in the way that when you watch, when you actually experience a nightmare, you wake up thinking that didn't make a lot of sense. Is that, as far as nightmares are concerned, you can kind of go back and say that was very weird, and I don't exactly know why I was scared, but I was. And so you know it's a nightmare because it's so far out of the realms of possibility, and that's exactly what Mr. Jones is that there are moments here that are very confusing and very odd, but the confusing nature of that, this aspect does make a nightmare. It makes a dream that you want to wake up from. And so you wake up from it, you think, okay, what was that? That was definitely a trip. And that's exactly what Mr. Jones does. It does take you down a very dark passage. It does take you down a roller coaster where you have absolutely no control. And so because of no control, it does elevate the fear factor to some degree. And so that's something I liked. But unfortunately, as I said, the ambition is there, and the ambition kind of just, it gets too over the top. And so it is very confusing. A lot of things are happening, and then after a while I started to feel as though I wanted a sense of control. Now, I don't want complete control. As I said, a lack of complete control is something that is very scary, but you have to have some sort of control. And if you don't have some sort of control, I felt as though this was a runaway train, is that the driver was not there, and that the conductor of this train, the train was just, it wasn't being led. And so it was just waiting to crash. And when it does crash, I felt as though, okay, well, I was kind of, I was becoming desensitized to things that were going on. Is that it was just one scene after another of very random things happening. And I could understand the overall, the intention of what was going on. And it does make something very interesting right at the end that will actually make you think. But it's getting to that ending that I thought was a little bit confusing and a little bit irritating after a while, because it was just a random scenes of, very strange and very nightmarish things happening, which as far as a horror film is what you want, but that I never felt as though it had control over what was going on as far as the horror set pieces are concerned. So by the end of the film, I thought to myself, well, that was strange. That was very, very weird, which again is something I like. But as far as creating something weird, you have to have some sort of control as a director, because if you don't, it just feels like a collection of just really morbid and very strange things happening for the sake of it. And that's what I believe happened to Mr. Jones. It wanted to be different, but it didn't really know how to control that difference to a point where I felt as though it was rewarding. And so it's a movie that I would recommend if you're a found footage horror fan, because it does try different things, but unfortunately I just don't feel as though that ambition all came together quite as well as it really needed to. So overall, for Mr. Jones, going to give this one 2 stars. Still go out there and see it. I got something out of it at least. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.